Welcome back. This is part 6, and on part 5 we introduced the problem, and I explained, or rather I shown you what the problem was, but I didn't explain the solution, right? This is the part where we explain the solution. So firstly, what is that problem that we had? That problem is known as a dependency problem, okay? So if we go onto our code here and we look at notified client here, notified client is actually depending on this here, on the notification service, okay? So this problem here where you have your class here, which is bank account, calling another class here. But the problem is not calling that class, okay? The problem is that we're not just calling the functions within that class. We're also doing this part here. We're creating an instance of that class. So that's actually what the problem is, okay? So that problem is a dependency problem. So how do we get around that? So firstly, we need to get to a situation where we don't create an instance of this class here inside our bank account class here. Because what we're currently doing now by creating this instance here of this class, our bank account knows how to create another class. Bank account should only know how to create itself, really, should be concerned by itself and not being concerned about this here, creating other classes, okay? So if anywhere where you see the new keyword, okay, that's where the problem gets to be, because that means that class, whatever that class that you do, you are creating that new the new instance from, is actually in charge of creating that instance. By saying new, you're passing that whole responsibility of creating a new instance to the bank account class. Now the bank account class knows how to create that, and that shouldn't be the case. So that's known as tight coupling. So your code is tightly coupled. So your bank account class is tightly coupled to this notification service. So ideally what we want to do is we want this new notification service to not be created here, to be created elsewhere outside this class here, and we only getting a reference of it, or the dependency is being passed to us, and we only just calling the functionalities here without creating the instance here. So let's say, for an example, we are calling the bank account here, right? So we should, our consumer here, which is the program.cs, needs to create the instance and pass it in here, so that the bank account here can just call the notify, assuming that the program.cs class has actually created that instance successfully. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do a refactoring on our code, and the way to do that is actually for us to create interfaces. So what's an interface? Okay, so I mean, if I say I'm interfacing with somebody, I'm merely just speaking with them or communicating with them. I'll give you a typical example here. That example that we kept speaking about, I think let's rather keep it consistent instead of me giving you another example. The car. For you to turn on the car there, we said you are using your key, right? You put the key in the ignition and you turn it on. You turn the car on, right? That's a way of interfacing with your engine via that what do you call it? The ignition, okay? And you are interfacing via the ignition by turning on the key, basically, right? So that's a way of communicating with that. But you are not concerned about how it actually turns on. So, but how the car actually turns on, this is similar to what we're doing here. We're concerned about the how, because we know how to create the instance of this, which shouldn't be the case. So we should rather interface with that via other mechanism, which is more easier for us to communicate with rather than us knowing how to do it. We need somebody to tell us how to do it. In this case, the person that's telling us, or rather the function that's telling us how to communicate with the engine, it's actually that ignition. It's not the only way, obviously, but it's part of the way when it comes to turning on. It's the ignition or the startup button or whatever the case might be, right? So how do we go about creating those interfaces? I mean, there we have the interface called the ignition. Here, how do we create this? Okay, an interface is actually a construct. It's an idea, so to say, right? An idea within the C# programming language. Other languages do have interfaces. Those, the interface kind of doesn't tell you how you do a specific thing. Like, for example, it won't tell us how to send email, how to notify all channels. It will just specify and say, when you are interfacing with me, you need to know how to do these here. You get what I mean? Now I'm going to give you an example that I think will be prevalent or will rather make more sense. Within the hiring domain, within the HR domain, when we are looking for a person, a developer, for example, I'm going to look for a developer that can do specific functions. So in this case, think of notification service as a developer or as a developer role, right? I'm looking for a developer that can do send SMS, send email, and notify all channels, that kind of thing, right? So, but in this case, obviously, in the real life scenario is that I'm looking for a developer that can program in C#, that can write, that has knowledge on APIs, that has knowledge on MVC, that has knowledge on AWS and Azure cloud services, for example, right? Notice that I'm not saying that I'm looking for a specific person to do that. I'm saying I'm looking for a person that can do that. If I interview multiple people and one person can actually do that, then I'm happy about that. If that person turns me down, I can get another person, provided that they can satisfy all of those requirements, right? But I'm not saying I'm looking for Letokonolo, for example, to come and do that. You get what I mean? So us here doing new bank account, we are saying we are looking for the bank, the notification service, sorry about that. We are, us saying new notification service, we're saying we are looking for notification service. But instead, we should say we are looking for somebody or someone that knows how to do those functionalities of a notification service. And how we go about doing that is creating that interface. How do we go about creating an interface? Okay, let's go create an interface. Let's see here, we're gonna go under the services here. So actually we have it already. I'm gonna delete it. After deleting it, I'm gonna go in here because it's gonna be required. Then I'm just gonna delete it. But how do I go about creating it? I mean, you can create it manually and right click here and add new item and then say interface. And then you can literally, let's do that so you can see. You can literally just write down, name your interface and then write down all the functionality, your spec basically, to say, I want you to be able to do 1, 2, 3. Send emails, do that, and all of that, right? But we're not gonna do that. I'm gonna follow the easier approach because I'm lazy and that's right at times, okay? So I'm gonna go in here and then just click on this notification service, the actual name of the class, and the light bulb comes there, and we're gonna say extract interface. Then you will notice that it says I notification service. So in C#, it's a convention for us to actually put an I next to whatever the interface that you're creating. So for now, we say notification service, so we're going to say I notification service. So the I denotes that that's an interface, okay? So it's not like it won't work if you don't have the I, it will. So the problem here is that obviously if you don't follow convention, we won't know if that's a class or because there's no way to tell outside when you're looking at both notification service CS. But if you put the I, we know that, oh, that's an interface, okay? And then what it does, then it will say it will create a notification service.cs, and then it says, these are the public members that are available in that class there. Send email, send SMS, and notify all channels. We say okay. And then by us really doing what we just did, it also just inherits, not inherit, but rather implements. So in C#, we have these columns here. The columns can mean if there's a class on this side, it means we are inheriting from. That's following the inheritance. But now because it's actually an interface, you are not really inheriting from, you are implementing. So what we are now saying is this, okay? We are saying that notification service here supposed to implement all this functionality here. So for example, this is the same as that job spec that we spoke about there, that a job spec say you should know this and this and this and this as whatever developer that comes in. It's not a specific developer, but whoever we hire must be able to do that. So think about that as this here. This is the functionality that we want. This is what we want you also do. This is also what we want you to do. So it only just states what needs to be done, but not how it's done. It just tells you that it needs to be the method. You follow the return type. So all my methods that side are void, and the name of the method, and also the input, the parameters there, okay? So we need to be able to implement those. So an interface doesn't have the body. It doesn't have a body of how you do things. It just say, this is what you need to be able to do, not how you do it. They don't care. Just like when you hire somebody, you're saying, I need you to be a C# developer, but you're not going to tell them how to develop. I mean, you're going to have standards, but how they're actually doing their job, you're not going to tell them. Otherwise, you might as well just do it yourself. I mean, think about it. So then we say this notification service must implement that interface. And here we are telling it how to do here. So if, for example, let me comment this part out here, all these methods out. This is similar to not having any of these methods here. As you can see now, we have the red squiggly there. And if you look at it, it says notification service does not implement interface member in iNotification.notify channel, send email, and send SMS. So that means you cannot proceed without implementing those. Whenever we say we are implementing this class, we must implement those. So if I come here and I say on the drop down here and say implement interface, you will see it or put those that there, but it doesn't tell us exactly how to go about doing it. So we'll have to do all of that. So let me undo here and get back to my state. So I was here. So that's basically that. We did our interface here. I've shown you how to create an interface, what is the convention, and all of that. So we're not going to be using that interface in this session here. So we're going to use it on the next session. So stay tuned. Botsa tlhoge.